Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, global greetings. Today, we are going to talk about unveiling the power of compositions and Lightning Web components. Thank you for joining the Letterkenny Ireland Developers Group. These are virtual sessions after a long time. We'll be continuing to do some more virtual sessions going forward. You can connect with us and stay in touch at YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, X now. Moving on, thank you again so much for taking the time and spending this hour with us, trying to and grow more in Salesforce space. Um, these are various QR codes to connect with us if you want to just take a screenshot or save it for future reference. You can join the chatter group where we post all the recordings, and you can join the YouTube channel as well, where we'll be posting all the recordings of. You can see the previous sessions also, which we did, all of that, and connect socially. I'm Nishant Singh Panwar. I'm the community group leader and Salesforce architect and a consultant currently working with Dell Technologies and based out in Letterkenny in Donegal, Ireland. Um, you can reach out to me on various channels, social channels at Nishant Force, and also check my blog nishantforce.com for all the blogs which I've written. Not many, but yeah, you can check for most of them there. I have 10 years of Salesforce implementation experience across various industries. I have 15 Salesforce certifications, and I'm a certified application and system architect. I love learning on Trailhead. I have triple star ranger. Loves music. Listen to psychedelic rock. Play guitar for hobby, and I come from Udaipur, Rajasthan, in India. So that's about me. Today's our speaker. Huge welcome and thanks for Volodymyr to taking the time and spending this hour with us, talking us through about composition in LWC. He's a lead Salesforce developer and architect with Noltic, and you can connect with him socially at VVRatco. Thank you so much, Volodymyr, for taking this time. Hand it over to you to take us through and enjoy the learning. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Volodymyr. I'm from Ukraine, and basically today I'm going to present you the power of composition in Lightning Web Components because I think that this is basically the thing where we are starting working with kind of modular concepts. Yeah, we're familiar with the composition and, well, not the composition, but OOP modularity in Apex, but I would like also to bring this topic to LWC because basically the component itself said that we need to make this like in the modular approach, and I will tell you like how we can start making our applications more modular and utilize the power of composition and other features which are available, let's especially in JavaScript, which we can utilize in LWC. Yeah, so let's take a look at our agenda. First of all, yeah, we will talk about LWC Bundle because in my opinion, everything starts from LWC Bundle, and we can actually use the great features from it. And this actually help us arrange the elements from the beginning. So we will take a look through all of the type of files, what we can actually do, and how it can simplify our life. Then we will go into actual composition. We will take a look what kind of composition we might have in LWC. We will go through Mixins, through slots. And basically, if this is not the part of the composition, but still worth of attention, this is inheritance. So basically, that's another approach of how we can, in some specific cases, utilize the great power of inheritance in JavaScript and especially in LWC. Well, what I will be doing, I will be switching between the presentation and some code, yeah, and maybe some environment just to show you, okay, how it can be, how it can look like in the real life, with of course the simple examples. So yeah, you will not need to spend the time to investigate in what actually this code does because I was trying to make this simple. Yeah, all right, let's start actually with LWC Bundle. Yeah, so basically, as we know, that's like the Lightning components, they consist of different file types, which allows us to see to build the LWC components and after see them on the UI, or we might not see them on UI in case if this is service component. But basically, the main files which are included here is HTML file, GS file, CSS file, and metadata file. Of course, there might be some more files regarding the automated testing and some icons to, let's say, to change look and feel how they will look like in App Builder, but those are not so important in this topic because they are basically didn't change a lot for us. But those basically are. So HTML file is just our HTML markup, the backbone of our component, which will define, okay, well, what is actually will be the DOM structure of it, if of course it's not a service component. It defines our UI structure, and we can have multiple HTML files within one LWC bundle. GS file is basically kind of our engine. It might be the GS controller to control our UI behavior and all of the internal processes. And also it might act in as a service component, or our GS files might be acting as individual GS files where we might store different constants, functions, and many, many more. Also, we might have CSS files. The purpose of CSS is basically just to style our components. We basically might have different type of CSS. That might be regular CSS, that might be scope CSS. We might have multiple CSS files per component, and we might have actually standalone CSS components acting as LWC. And of course, we have the metadata file. Basically, that's the description of our component and what is possible to do with it or not. Basically, just to define it as a quick action, to be able to place it on app page, home page, community page, and many, many more things, which are basically were declared in metadata file. Yeah, all right, let's dive into multiple HTML files. So basically, first of all, inside of LWC, we might handle the folder structure. On the left side view, you're able to see how potentially multiple HTML file might look like. As you can see here, we have 3 different HTML templates. Basically, we have one for desktop view, one for mobile view. I called them to have some meaningful names, not just view 1, view 2, just, let's say, to predict some of the examples where, let's say, potentially you might need to have different UIs for mobile or for desktop view. But the purpose of having that functions which are performing, they are kind of the same. They are the same. There might be some differences, like in terms of how something is displayed or rendered in mobile view, or how something is rendered or displayed in desktop view. And maybe some of the functions might be a little bit different, but the core logic is basically the same, and we can encapsulate this in one GS file. Basically, just to switch how it might look like. Yeah. So basically, here we have the folder structure. So basically, we can arrange our elements in the way we like. So just to encapsulate the separate views in the separate folders, and the main we can place here. Basically, what is important to understand that, first of all, we need to import those views. How we're doing this? We're doing this by using this syntax. So as you can see here, it respects our folder structure. It might be multiple levels. So basically, you can arrange the elements in the way you like. Here we have import statements, and the important method here is render. Basically, our render method will define what view will be rendered. And the thing is that this method is not executed only once. This is a dynamic method. So here inside of the code for each of the views, what I have done, I have created the button, and then on switch, which is basically switching the mobile view. And if we go here, so here is basically this component. Then if you click, it will automatically switch the view. So basically, this, as I mentioned, this method is dynamic. It just not rendered only once. So you're quite flexible in switching HTML templates, like in the order you like, and basically you can implement the logic to show one or another one. Well, basically, when it's helpful, for example, if you have different, I don't know, the filters, or you can see that the core functionality is kind of the same, but you would like to have the different look and feel. So basically, this might be the right approach where you actually can utilize different HTML templates, but having one logic, one JS logic, which is encapsulated just in the one file. Yeah, so that's basically how we can handle different HTML templates. Moreover, if you would like to apply specific styles, you should name your CSS file the same, like course HTML template. In this case, your CSS will be, yeah, your CSS will be applicable for that file, for that view. Otherwise, yeah, you will not be able to do this. Yeah, so the rule is simple. The name of the template, the views can be completely different from your component. It's fine. So it's just for you to understand, okay, what is the purpose of this view. All right, let's move on. So that was the HTML files. Then I think which is very interesting one is multiple JS files, because as we know, components might be UI visible or not in terms of those are service components. We might have additional JS files attached to any type of component. Basically, what you can see here, it's kind of similar what you have seen for HTML files, but instead you might have different JS files. So then it means that you can arrange them in the way and the purpose you would like. So you can split them by some constants, by functions, by libraries, by some other meanings which make sense for you. And basically, what doing in the files, in additional files, you can basically export the logic you would like, let's say, to import in your main component. Because the thing is that you're not able to import the functions from additional files to another component. That is not possible. Then it means that you need to create export statement in the main JS file, because additional JS file will be only, at least for now, they are only visible for internal components. Basically, you can have everything you want, just some functions, constant, and the different, yeah, syntaxes is supported because this is like the ECMAScript. It follows the ECMAScript standards. So basically, you're not limited here as you was in, for instance, Aura. And the good thing here is that if you would like to use it, you just use the import statement to separate and segregate those different elements into separate files. So when, let's say, at some point you realize that your function can be reused in different components, the only thing you need to do is just to move the export from internal file and create one, let's say, LWC component and place it there. And here, you're already utilizing this function. The only thing you will have to change is the import. So you will spend less time for re-importing the function, but it means that it is highly reusable and take you very small effort to make it reusable from internal to make it external. That is, if we're talking about multiple JS files in controller or in service component. Another thing is having multiple CSS files. Well, let's imagine that for some of the reason you would like to separate styles for some footer, for header elements, for body elements, for table elements. You are able to do this by doing the same exercise as we did previously. So basically, you can create a folder structure. You can create the files in the root folder. It doesn't matter. And basically, you can import later on those different CSS files into your component. On the right side, you can see that we basically are able to create we're able to create the component which will be having only CSS file, and will not have the JS file or basically HTML file. So basically CSS and meta file. In terms of importing additional CSS files, of course, we need to, first of all, import them internally into component. And then what we need to do is to declare static variable, which is called style sheets. And then in the array, we need to indicate CSS files we would like to include. Important to understand here that the order of files here in the static statement is important, because if you will import them in the not correct order, and you have the, let's say, the CSS selectors or styles might be overwritten by the latest class. So basically you should, if you have some similar parts which are placed in different CSS style sheets, you should be aware of it, because you need to know the correct order of how you would like to import this. So that's why it's recommended to keep totally separated CSS selectors and styles in those different files. Otherwise, you might overwrite something in the way you would not expect. In terms of importing single CSS component, what you will have to do, you will have to go to your CSS file inside of the any component, and then you can also make the import statement, which is supported by, which is quite kind of common for CSS files, but basically you will import the single CSS component inside of your CSS style sheet for in other LWC component. Another thing is that it is possible, in at least in WebStorm and in other EDEs, to leverage the CSS or preprocessor. Basically, CSS preprocessors are kind of, let's call this the processor which will translate, let's say, the kind of code which you've written into real CSS statement. It is extremely useful when you're heavily involved into developing custom UI applications and you have a lot of CSS style sheets. Basically, what it will allows you to do to write your CSS in the compact way, and then basically it will be expanded into auto-generated CSS. So basically, if you will have the statement like this, it will be transformed into something which you are able to see on the right side. So basically, you can have some for, if statements, and it will save your time just not to write, let's say, all of the padding elements or margin stuff. So basically, you can make it more automated, especially with some CSS selector groupings. So basically, it helps you to provide it in more shorter way, and you can actually use it. So basically, what you need to do, you need to add the SCSS to your bundle, and then just write the SCSS syntax. And once you have completed with it, it will automatically generate you the CSS file. Of course, you will have to set up your CSS preprocessors in the EDE, so basically it will be correctly generated. But I found it very useful, because you're able basically to make your life easier in terms if you need to generate the complex CSS classes. All right, so that's basically, we were looking into capabilities of the, let's say, component bundles itself. So basically, the folder structure, the multiple files, which will help you to arrange your elements, let's say, and make it more modular, make it more robust. So basically, you can separate all of the functions and responsibilities. But still, there are space for how can we basically implement our components in the way to use composition. Basically, the composition is like a suspension bridge. Each line adds strength and takes none away. That was said by Robert Henry, American painter, and which were applicable for art, but I think it's also applicable for programming. Then, if we will take a look, what kind of we might explore in LWC, those are slots and mixins. If we're talking about the slots, then it means that those will be implemented inside of your HTML markup. And if we're talking about mixins, that's basically the way how you can make the composition inside of JavaScript. So those concepts are different, because in terms of slots, we're operating with HTML files, HTML structures mostly. And if we're talking about the mixins, it basically means that we will use the capabilities of JavaScript language and apply this inside of LWC components. Let's take a look at the composition. So basically what we can see is, let's imagine that we have this component. And in this component, we have two slots. One is the name slots, which named by other, and one is default slot. By making this markup with slots, we can say that, hey, in this, between these elements, we can paste any content we want. And if we will use it, how it will look like? Well, we can see that basically we're using the standard markup, but inside of this markup, not passing this as a passing this kind of internal markup, we can define, okay, what additional HTML structures we would like to inject into this component. In our case, we are adding some text here, and on the bottom we can see how it will be rendered. Well, the benefit of this approach is that you're able to set up in the component the basic structure, which, let's say, which might be satisfying the most of the needs, but there's often a need to make any customization. So with help of the slots, you can actually customize already pre-built elements with already existing functions, but you would like to tailor look and feel. So that's why, in this case, the slots are your best friends, because it means that you are making direct impact on the UI, which you are seeing. The best examples of how Salesforce is utilizing slots is a lightning card element. Because in lightning card element, you're basically able to define header, actions, footer with help of slots elements. Or basically, some of the elements you can define by properties, attributes. This is kind of hybrid approach. And yeah, basically you can use either slots or, in this case, for attributes. But basically slots gives you possibility to inject not only text, but any, I don't know, tables, div elements, anything you would like from the HTML perspective. Well, I think the great use case for slots might be the model windows, because we know that often we might use the model window for anything, like for confirmation, for rejection, for selecting some new attributes, to complete some online form, to send an email. There are many, many, many cases where we might utilize model window. And we cannot actually predict all of the look and feels which should be there. So it means that in this case, what we can do, we can define the basic structure, which will say, okay, this is your header, this is your body, this is your footer. We can make it pretty standard for everybody, but with help of slots, we are actually allows customization there. So basically, you can paste any HTML structure you want, but the core thing is that we encapsulate the basic functions like save, close model, and basically we also allow the possibility to override those functions. So the great advantage here in using slots is that you can create a container which is highly configurable. So basically you will decide, okay, which content I need to see there. And especially when you will say that, okay, something might be customizable by attributes, but something by slots, it makes you very flexible model where you don't need to like reinvent the wheel, but you just need to use the container component and then inject your HTML markup. Yeah, let's go right now to the Mixins. So Mixins is basically something which is applicable for GS side. Mixin is a class. It's not a component itself. So basically, it's class that contains method to be used by other class without having to be the parent of the class. What actually it means? So basically, what you have GS class, you have some methods and properties defined, and when you're using Mixin, it means that you gives all of the methods and properties available to another class, but it will not be your parent directly. So it means that at the same time, you might have multiple Mixins assignment. So you will not have one parent, but you will inherit all of the properties and attributes and functions from the initial Mixin. What it gives us that we can have the modular structure. So basically, Mixins can have kind of encapsulated responsibility. For example, like Salesforce did it for navigation. To apply navigation to any element, what we need to do, we need to use navigation Mixin element. And basically, it means that it gives you the behavior of how to navigate. So if you're thinking about a Mixins, you should think, first of all, about behavior. What type of behavior will I inherit? but it's not direct inheritance in this sense. How it may look like? First of all, what we need to do is we need to create a service component which will be holding inside the Mixins. In our case, you can see that on the bottom side, the name of the component is my mixing, but the name of the mixin is a mixin example. The syntax is that you are exporting mixin example, which accept the superclass, and then this mixin example extends this super. And inside of the mixin, we are able to basically declare any properties and methods which we want. Very important things to note that we are able actually in the Mixins to import standard LWC elements like API, wire, track property. We are able, if we're talking about wires, we're able to declare wire methods. We are able to subscribe to Lightning messaging channel inside of Mixins. So it means that basically every component can inherit this behavior. And how it looks like when we would like to use Mixins. Let's say we have our mixin user. Then what we need to do is, first of all, we need to import the mixin, which is the top line. And then we just need to use the syntax, which allows us to extend mixin example. And by the superclass, we are passing, in this case, Lightning element. So it means that our Lightning element will be extended with mixin example behavior and properties. Well, the good use case for mixin is the value. For example, you would like to, let's imagine that you have a form, you have different elements, some text fields, phone fields, email fields, number fields, and etc. But you would like to apply the standard validation and standard validation process and behavior in place. What you can do, you can design your validation mixin, which will contain all of the validation methods for email, phone validation, text validation, some number validation, etc. Each of your form elements, like inputs, they will use this mixin. What is important to know that we can expose public methods, like API methods, inside of the mixin. So it means that if we will query those elements from using this template query, we can then invoke public methods there, and we can get some result whether this validation was passed successfully or not. So it means that when the form knows which elements to query, then we can call standard method validate. And then basically, we can validate each of the element. And after that, we can say, okay, form validated, we can go on, or we need to make some of the fixes. This is basically the one example of how mixins can be used, or as Salesforce is using it. You can basically say which element can be, let's say, can make navigations by using navigation mixin. Then later on, I will show you the concept, like in the EDE, how we can kind of implement this. Another thing is inheritance. So basically, that's something which is a little bit different from a mixin because it is inheriting. We are using inheritance here. So yeah, there could be only one parent, and there is some specific in how can it be done in LWC. So let's imagine the case where we have parent element, we have GS controller, which is actually defining the state of the element, some API, track properties, some functions. But in LWC inheritance, the most important things probably and the benefit is that we can define the HTML template with some predefined structure. What we can do next, we're defining the child element. And let's take the syntax. What we're doing, we're importing parent element, and then we are extending our child class with parent element directly. So it's not like in the mixin, we're not passing Lightning element. Because if we will move back here, what we're extending from Lightning element. But in this case, we are extending from the parent element, which means that we are making direct inheritance. So it means that we are keeping hierarchical structure to, like, in opposite to mixins. In mixins, we can have multiple assignment at once. And basically, we're not keeping any hierarchy. But here we're keeping hierarchy. And as you can see here on the right side, there is only child GS element. So basically, HTML is inherited. We don't need to create it. But what we can do, we can adjust GS logic here. And it means that HTML structure is already defined. It's not touchable. But we are able to make some corrections to GS logic. And the question might be from your side, okay, where we might use this? The thing is that the use case which we faced on one of the project is, for example, search inputs. So let's imagine that you would like to have standardized and unified search elements across the whole application, but the purpose of the search might be different. One of the search is designed to search accounts. One of the searches you might need to perform to search Google addresses by connecting to API search. One of the searches might be connected to searching several elements at once. But the thing is that by using this concept, what you can do, you can have basic placeholder component, which knows what to do when you're typing something, how to display all of the options, how to handle events when you select the option, what you need to decide precisely from which data source you need to collect those options, and what need to be happen when you selected one. So in this case, what you can do, you can inherit from this base search input. And then let's say you can say that, okay, your collection will be filled from integration, from Google integration, or from some Apex class, or from some different sources. So basically, you make the behavior precise to each of the cases. And this basically gives you, like, inheritance will give you that possibility. So one container and core element, which is defining the UI behavior and some basic JS behavior, and then you just inherit all of the things, and then you basically say what precise behavior need to be implemented in several moments, and that's basically it. So yeah, in terms of which approach use on your project, yeah, let's take a look at this summary. So yeah, what we can say that if we would like to make the heavy manipulation on DOM elements, I mean on HTML structure, then basically slots will be your choice because it allows you to paste different HTML structure inside. If you are focused on, okay, what kind of behavior I would like to inherit, then probably you need to use the Mixins, because this allows you to encapsulate some specific behavior in the kind of container, and then you can extract all of this behavior. And especially, well, we can consider this as kind of interfaces, but basically with some implementation, because in this case, we are not building hierarchy. If hierarchy is not important for us, but we still need to inherit some of the functions, then we need to use Mixins. In terms of if we really need to rely on hierarchy structure, and basically we know that we will not be touching HTML heavily, or at least will be not touching, then in some of the cases, inheritance might be the choice in this case. Yeah, that's kind of the resources for different things which I were talking about, especially for multiple templates, CSS style sheets, how we can share some GS code. Yeah, and what I would like to show you is basically, some of the examples. Yeah, so the first one is basically, this one was desktop view. This one is using the concept of inheritance. Можно. Біжи. Я трошки зайнятий, біжи десь. So the idea here was, it is not implemented in that way, but what we can do actually, let's imagine we can type some search. We can, let's say, hit the button, and our behavior will be executed in this case. And when we are inheriting this from the parent element, the UI structure will remain the same, but with help of attribute, we can basically change some labeling and so on and so on. But we will have the unified structure. So if we take a look at the code, this one was, parent element. So yeah, basically here you define the structure. And for child, now let me find the child element. Yeah, for child, we only have GS. Yeah, and the thing is that we're able actually to use some of the functions and the lifestyle hooks from the parent element. So basically, as you see here, I'm calling the super connected callback here. And if we will, let me, if we will open console log, then we will see that first is connected callback loaded from the parent element. Then connected callback from the child will be applicable. But if we will remove those super statements and we'll try to save the element, it means that only lifestyle hooks from child element will be executed. And basically by, well, as you can see, I have declared that the name is my child. But I can say here that it could be something. So we're able to use all of the properties which were already declared in the parent element. Okay, let me save this. It should be there. Yeah, as you can see here, it changed to something, and inside of the console, you can see that basically we're executing only child callbacks. So it means that you can adjust the existing behavior, or you can call some of the parent behaviors. Yeah, and one thing about the mixing. So let's imagine that we have here my mixing. Yeah, just for example, as I mentioned, let's imagine that we have an API validate method. And basically here in this method, we are encapsulating validation logic. For example, here we encapsulate all of the, let's say, all of the constants or anything, any information need to be used for email validation, phone validation, and etc., etc. Then let's say if we will go, for example, here, yeah, let's imagine that this shadow slot have this. So we can have some other, or not even shadow slot. I will comment this out. So let's say we have my input. Let's say we have these multiple elements. Some of them are phones. For example, is phone true, or some of them is email true. And then here we have some lightning button with on-click handle validation. What we need to do, what we need to do here is basically here what we will be doing. We will be implementing this. Then what we can say that, for instance, we see my input. Then what we can do will be this query selector all. And we let's say we would like to get all of the elements which are names as, yeah, this is not like really syntax, but the idea is, so then what we can do for each, just an example, then what we can call some const, oh, it can be here, valid equals true. Then, for example, what we can do is valid will be yeah. So basically, making an assumption that my input elements or anything else here will be implementing validation mixing. Then, knowing this, that this validation mixing exposes us at public method, what we can do, we can query all of these elements. We can apply the standard function for all of them, and then, depending on what is valid statement is, we can take an appropriate action or send some notification that this is not valid. Moreover, this validate can make some UI changes on each of these particular elements. So what it gives to you, you don't need to know what is the type of element, how they are implemented, what is the specific implementation is inside. What you need to know that you can use this validate method, and you will know for sure this element is valid or not. You can make not a general validation, but validation per element or in any way you would like. But the concept is that by exposing this as a mixin as a public method, you can apply this to any elements, and then what things your component needs to know is what elements actually to query, and then you can use this validate function to basically make validation. In case, for example, if you don't want to have the standard implementation of validate method, you can go inside of the component and basically declare your own implementation of this API method. What you need to do is just to simply write, yeah, you will do something like this. And here you are. You're making your own implementation because you think you need to have this tailor. So it means that you're not overriding mixin function. You just override your own function. And then still this validate function will be called, and yeah, you will have your results. Basically, then it's up to you to decide what you will return. You will return the Boolean statement. You will return the object with some description, which you will be using later on. Yeah, it's just up to you. But the concept is that you can actually use this with help of mixins, and not overriding and duplicating things. If you have any questions, yeah, just feel free to ask.
I think I had a question about the last thing what we talked about. Um, so when we're saying the mixing would, capture the inputs and return back Boolean or something, can we, use both like mixing and slots together? Like it was returning back some HTML which can dynamically re-render the components, right? So that component is there with different slots, and that can, maybe have green or red or whatever, like, or maybe the CSS could change. All of that kind of a thing can also be done, or they are totally separated.
Basically, no, because you can mix both of the things. Basically, you can pass also the HTML structure, and let's say depending on what you get from the validate method, you can let's say you can say which properties to change, or you can change directly the HTML in slots because you're also able to operate on it based on some template station. I think it's better always, to use mix of some of the approaches. But in this case, I was more saying like, okay, if you need to talk about behavior, then valid like mixins is your case. If you need to take care about the, let's say, some stable structure which you would like to modify with HTML, then the slots is your choice. But if you would like to have both, like, okay, I need to extend some behavior, I also need to make some manipulation on the let's say HTML side, yes, then you can combine both, and it will be more powerful, because then you will be able to specify some precise behavior. But what I would like to say that in this case, elements are encapsulated from the form. Form doesn't need to know how, let's say, exactly this element is making validation. The only thing I need to know is the result of this validation.
Yeah, we'll be sharing the presentation on the chatter group, so you can join our chatter group on the Trailblazer Community Groups. Um, with that, I think I'll thank Volodymyr a lot for putting all the efforts and joining us today, taking us through the compositions in LWC. And it really, really great feature to make our code modularize and have things, scale with larger enterprise orgs and things like that. It's really helpful for those kind of scenarios where we have common framework spread across multiple components and things like that. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Yeah,
Thank
take care,
you.
guys. Bye.